It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
Thank you so much. I say as if there are people clapping, but there are not. I mean, maybe you're clapping at home. I don't know. I can't see you. Send me an email, jamie@snlhof.com. Put thunderous applause in the subject. So before we go into anything, I'm going to ask you to please wipe your feet. The custodians are off this week, so we need to keep this place spick and span. The SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair. Each week we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer, and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity in the hall. This is really exciting stuff because tomorrow, that's right, tomorrow, the voting begins. Are you registered? I know I've been hammering this home a lot, but if you're not registered, you can't vote. And voting is the exciting part of this. That's how we determine who makes it into the hall. There are 31 nominees. You get 15 votes. And from there, we do some complex mathematics. And if a nominee appears on 66.6% of the ballots, they will enter the SNL Hall of Fame. So like I said, really an exciting time. Tomorrow is when it all begins. We wrap things up February 5th. And on February 6th, we'll go live and announce who our inductees are. This is an exciting time. Speaking of excitement, this week we are introducing our listeners to the great Greg Croak, who will be conversing with Thomas about Mike Myers. Mike frickin' Myers. This is a guy who was a repertory player and took the world by storm with some of the memorable and iconic sketch characters to ever really come out of SNL. I'm really looking forward to Greg and Thomas's conversation because my mind isn't 100% made up yet. I know he belongs in the hall, but does he go in on his first ballot? That's a really interesting question for me. Is that something that you think about? Do you think about where and when somebody should go into the hall? Before we go any further, why don't we check in with our friend Matt in his Minutia Minute.
Hey, Jamie, how you doing?
I'm great. How about you?
I can't complain. I'm going to be chatting about one of my all-time favorites here today, so I'm very excited about this.
Mike Myers.
Yeah, Canadian boy. He's very proud of that fact. Mike Myers, 5'8", born May 25th, 1963. His first episode was January 21st, 1989. That is with the I'd say it's the second, so there's the original Not Ready for Primetime players, but I'd say this cast with Phil Hartman, Jan Hooks, Victoria Jackson, John Lovitz, that's sort of like one of those other iconic classes of players that people think back to fondly.
Yeah.
It's kind of iconic, and that was the first cast that he was a part of. His last episode, January 21st, 1995, season 20. That was a weird year. Had a huge cast. Alan Cleghorn, Chris Elliott, Chris Farley, Morena Banks, Janine Garofalo, Norm Macdonald, etc. But also, you had a lot of people coming and going that season. Like Janine quit halfway through due to what she felt was some toxicity within the environment, kind of at its peak back then. You also had a lot of other people leaving and coming partway through the season. And G.E. Smith left that season as well.
Oh, wow.
G.E. Smith being a fixture of the band. So it's really a kind of where Lorne says we are now this season, with a transitionary season where there's a lot of upheaval and a lot of trying new things and trying new people and not sure where it's going to be next season. But yeah, it's a tumultuous year for him to leave in, but he hit it big. Now he's a Second City alum. He actually was in class with Dave Foley and Kevin McDonald of Kids in the Hall, and almost joined the troupe. They were considering him, but they went a different direction, brought in Scott instead, and the rest is history. He has two brothers. One is a music journalist and a writer who wrote the biography of the Kids in the Hall troupe, because he and Mike we're very good friends. His other is Peter, who worked at Sears with my wife. So yes, they both worked in corporate. So a little bit of a personal connection there. I've never met Mr. Myers because I think my head would explode, if not my heart. One of the two would explode. It's just which would explode first. Now, his earliest appearance was as Ari in an episode of Scout's Honor on the King of Kensington. Yeah, so he got a lot of Canadian heritage in his back catalog. In fact, he was also on The Littlest Hobo.
I was gonna say,
yes,
I've seen him on that episode.
Yeah, sassy frisbee playing teenager in the episode Boy on Wheels. Yeah, now he did spend a big part of his early years doing comedy in the UK, where he performed in the Edinburgh Fringe, and it kind of feels like that and his English father really informed a lot of his humor. He leans into the silly in a way that we see in troops like Monty Python, which was kind of, I think, needed in Saturday Night Live because it was kind of an injection of a new kind of humor that they didn't do very often. Wayne's World actually predates SNL in that Wayne Campbell was first seen on the show City Limits in 1983, which was hosted by Chris Ward, as Chris's cousin Wayne from Scarborough. And he was a huge Rush fan. So I think that really scans very little change to the character, just added his friend Garth. Got a long history of roles, 56 actor credits, 18 writer credits, 6 producer credits. I think the strangest credit that he has, though, is the Dave Foley Holiday Special, The True Meaning of Christmas Special, where he plays himself and Tom Green plays Tom Green, but Tom Green is his butler, and Dave Foley comes to him to seek advice on how to do a good Christmas special, and Mike Myers is just in a bath full of money, which Dave politely tops up with Wayne's World money. So he had an option, Wayne's World money or Austin Powers money. He went with some good old-fashioned Wayne's World money. So Canadian boy, very proud. And again, if I ever have a chance to meet him, I would probably die. I have a friend who saw him in the park feeding squirrels a few years ago, so you never know. You never know.
Greg, I am so excited to have you on because when I discovered your podcast sometime in the last year or two, of course, you're one half of the Saturday Night Vibes podcast with your co-host Emily. And when I first saw your podcast or heard your podcast, I started looking at you and Emily as kind of my SNL spiritual cousins in a big way because of just the positivity, the good vibes with your show. And I always try to watch SNL as an optimist. I'm kind of a critic, but I think I'm fair, and I focus more on the stuff that I like, and I get that sense from you and Emily as well.
Totally. Yes, it's been awesome to connect with you, Thomas, over the past, year plus, however long it's been in the pandemic times. But yeah, I feel like not that SNL is always firing at all cylinders, but I feel like there's enough coverage of the things that they don't get right that. Yeah, Emily and I have always bonded over the joy that the show brings us. So we decided to try to balance the scales a little bit by just going over the top with the positivity.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to inject some positivity today into our conversation because we're here to celebrate a great cast member who means a lot to me, who was in my time of SNL when I discovered the show.
Yeah.
And that's Mike Myers. So I want to ask you, how did you become acquainted with Mike Myers on SNL?
Yeah, so I was thinking a little bit about this as we were leading up to this. So I was born in 1986 to position people a little bit. So not really sort of the target audience when he was live and crushing, but I kind of came to SNL with the Comedy Central reruns, in maybe the mid to late 90s ish. And, they were showing a lot of this era to the point where I wasn't I couldn't really pick apart the different eras because I wasn't really old enough to be watching it live and didn't really have a sense of all that. But this was sort of, in a lot of ways, one of the casts that I kind of came up with when I really started to fall in love with the show. And it's so interesting to look back on this era now. As we said at the top, we're very focused on trying to appreciate the current cast in their time, because every cast in the history of the show, people have not appreciated for one reason or another, and then they go on to, make these all-time great movies and do other great things, and we look back and say, oh, of course, Mike Myers was so excellent. What a shoo-in. But the reality is, that's not the way we felt about a lot of these people in their time, and kind of looking back, what a heyday this was, and what a cast that he joined when he joined. It's just amazing that this is kind of what I sort of understood to be SNL when I was first getting to fall in love with the show.
Yeah, it was quite the golden era, and I think that's a really good point. I've always said that 15 years from now, people are going to look back at the current cast and long for the days. That's just the cycle of SNL. They're going to romanticize this era of SNL, as they should. There's a lot of good things, and as we should romanticize Mike Myers' era in the late 80s and early 90s, because that was a true golden era. And I'll position myself too. I was born in 1981, so I was probably 11. I was a weird kid that would binge SNL when I was 11 years old. super into the show from when I was a tiny kid. And
luckily, what I've learned in sort of the SNL podcasting space is that we were all kind of weird 11-year-olds. So
yes.
Luckily, this is the home for that.
Yes, all the weirdos, we've all found each other and bonded, so right. This is awesome. But I did catch up on a lot of this era too. Like you said, on Comedy Central, they would show the truncated versions of Saturday Night Live, and Mike Myers, man, he definitely stood out. So give me maybe the first Mike Myers character or sketch that stands out to you.
I mean, I think when I first think of him, and I should also say too that the other sort of reason why I really came to love Mike Myers later in my life is that my college roommate had the Best of Mike Myers DVD, and it's just sort of, of the 11 DVDs we had in college, it's just gonna, by percentages, gonna get watched about 1,000 times. So I really internalized a lot of those sketches. So I think of things like Japanese Game Show, and I think about theater stories and some of those ones, but I think really, without trying to make myself be the alt cool deep cut guy, it's really Wayne's World and Sprockets and really finding some of these just absolute unassailable hits that he in some cases came to the show with. These are like rock concerts. I mean, that's like the AC/DC of SNL, or I'm trying to think of like, what's the biggest? It's like the Stairway to Heaven of SNL. Just kind of like an unassailable all-time concept. It's just perfect in just about every way.
Yeah, and Mike Myers was one of those cast members that seemed truly fully formed when he started on the show. He started in season 14. I don't think he started right at the beginning of the season. I think he sort of joined mid-season, but he had done, he was part of the whole, I believe, Second City comedy scene and everything, and he had a lot of these characters fully formed or mostly formed and baked before he got on the show. And you had mentioned one of the biggies that he debuted in that first season was Wayne's World. So, of course, Wayne's World, huge hit, spawned 2 movies that I still love to this day. I don't think I've watched them in a few years. I don't know how they hold up necessarily, but they hold up well in my mind. So,
as it comes to Wayne's World, and as you mentioned, entering in season 14, so he had moved back to Toronto to be closer to his father, who had, I believe, Alzheimer's. So I think that it was sort of out of necessity that he moved back home from England, and he had ended up in the Toronto Second City and got a part of this Second City alumni show where they were doing, it was all these great all-time performers, and he ends up doing Wayne's World to begin the second act and just burns the place to the ground, as I'm sure that we can imagine. He does a piece with Martin Short, and Martin Short ends up just recommending him off of that performance straight to Lorne, who hires him without an audition. I mean, I'm not sure I can come up with too many more examples like that. I'm sure we'll be corrected in the comments.
Well, maybe like Billy Crystal and Martin Short, that cast, that The Last Dick I Ever Saw cast, was maybe poached and handpicked without auditions, but you're right. True. That's super rare.
And it's so middle of the season like that. And it's not like the show was in need of a jolt the way so those Ebersol hires were. You know, he's coming into a cast with Dana Carvey, Nora Dunn, Phil Hartman, Jan Hooks, Victoria Jackson, John Lovitz, Dennis Miller, Kevin Nealon, you know, Whitney Brown, Al Franken. So it's like Dana Carvey is starting to launch to the stratosphere at this point. The show is like really starting to reemerge. It's not like, I don't know, maybe this is revisionist history a little bit, but you know, he's coming into a pretty fully engaged cast and comes to them with what goes down as one of like the all-time great SNL sketches just in his back pocket. So, because I think about this all the time of, oh man, this person was so fully formed, and to hear them talk about it, they were sort of like, well, there's a lot behind the scenes you didn't see, but it's pretty hard to argue in this case that he was anything other than headed for the stratosphere. And after that half a season, he joined in, I want to say January or so. He immediately sort of went on tour with Dana Carvey and I think a couple other people, and was immediately the star of that show. To hear them talk about it, that, you know, he had these characters that were so explosive. So it just immediately, as someone that kind of ended up in Toronto by circumstances out of his control, ends up in this thing, gets thrown into the show, and all of a sudden he's gone. It's just, yeah, there's only a handful of cast members, I think, that you can follow that trajectory.
Yeah, no kidding. What a whirlwind that must have been for Mike Myers. And when he did Wayne Campbell and Wayne's World before SNL, I believe it was just him solo on stage doing these sketches. And they decided he needed a sidekick. So that's kind of, the show paired him and Dana, and they just had such great chemistry right away. They played off each other so well, and both of them were just such big performers. And maybe Mike was used to, and we'll see this as a trend, I think, throughout his tenure. I think he's most comfortable, oddly, in character, but being featured in a weird way. Like, I think he's most comfortable being the center of attention, but not necessarily as himself in a lot of ways. Yeah. And so I think that was the case with Wayne Campbell, and he sort of had to learn to work with Dana Carvey and work well with him. He did. I'm sure you enjoyed that partnership. What'd you make of it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing that in hindsight, I guess now we can say that they were so like destined for each other. But yeah, to hear them talk about it, it was sort of like, yeah, Mike Myers thinks that they've got this pretty good vehicle, and Dana Carvey's already kind of established himself as the new star on the show, so it made some sense to put them together. But you know, even to hear him talk, I heard him on the Conan O'Brien podcast talking about how when they did the Aerosmith Wayne's World, you know, that's a 9+ minute cold open, I think, and that's long. And he talked about afterwards, you know, crying in a dressing room because he thought he'd blown it, but I'm pretty sure that's what leads off his best of video now, and what an epic 9 minutes that is, where it has Tom Hanks coming out and being the roadie for Aerosmith. They're cutting to his breakfast nook. You know, he writes that amazing monologue for the bass player in Aerosmith. There's no blueprint for the proletariat, or whatever he's saying.
Okay, we had a lot of people, right? We told them that you guys were going to be on the show, right? But they had a lot of questions, right? So here are the top 3 questions they had for Aerosmith, okay? Question number 1. Is it true you guys don't do drugs or alcohol anymore?
Yeah, that's right. No drugs, no alcohol. Feels great.
No way.
Way.
No way.
Way.
Okay. Okay. Garth, go ahead. Next question.
Okay, next question is for Steven. Okay, are those really your lips, or are they lip implants like Barbara Hershey had in the movie Beaches?
They mine, man.
Bitchin' lips!
Well, Lipmeister. Okay, with the recent developments in Eastern Europe, do you think that communism is on the decline, or is this just a temporary setback?
Well, man, that's a hard question. But I would have to respond with a qualified yes. Although it seems that socialism is in repose until you remove the Stalinist-era party apparatchiks, there will be no real change in the Soviet Union.
No, I disagree, man. There's never been a blueprint for the dictatorship of the proletariat, so there's bound to be mistakes.
Again, it's hindsight, and this is part of why we need to appreciate these things when they happen, right? I mean, I can't imagine what it would have felt like to be in the room, to be in 8H when that was going on, or to see that at home for the first time. We could look back on it now as, of course, what an epic sketch that was.
And as the elder statesman in this discussion,
yeah,
I can tell you without a doubt that at the time, Wayne's World was a huge hit. I remember going to see Wayne's World in the theater. My sister took me and I think one of my cousins to go see Wayne's World in the theater, and we were so excited. Like I said, we were little SNL nerds. So excited to see Wayne's World. So many good memories. You had mentioned one of my favorites, that Aerosmith appearance, and that was the thing about that sketch is a lot of stars wanted to be a part of this Wayne's World phenomenon on SNL. I'm thinking of Madonna. Madonna hosted the show before this whole cast, but she had a memorable appearance on a Wayne's World sketch. When she wasn't even, I don't even think she was a musical guest that night. So it was an out of the blue Madonna appearance. So just so many people wanted to be associated with this Wayne's World phenomenon.
Yeah, and even when they had Wayne Gretzky on, that's something Mike Myers talks about. That's basically a higher station than Jesus to be Wayne Gretzky in Canada and being a very proud Canadian. He's literally written the book on being Canadian. Has talked about how huge that was, and then it was like, well, if we're going to have him, then we need the Wayne's World vehicle for him. Should give you something of how much juice that had at the time.
Yeah, Dana Carvey likes to tell a story about how Wayne Gretzky taught him how to hold a hockey stick.
That's right.
Yeah. So that must have been, I mean, Dana Carvey was a big star in his own right, but then you get people like Wayne Gretzky, which in Canada, you're right. I mean, Wayne Gretzky is one of the biggest things in Canada. So yeah, Wayne's World was a phenomenon. Any other Wayne's World memories before we kind of switch gears with Mike Myers here?
No, I mean, obviously the movies hold her permanent place in mine and the larger cultural zeitgeist heart. So I think it'll always sort of be a part of the vernacular. The fact that they, dropped him into Bohemian Rhapsody, understanding that the whole world's going to understand the wink back to Wayne's World when he was in the movie Bohemian Rhapsody. Just what a powerful contribution to our culture.
And you had mentioned sprockets earlier a few minutes ago, and I want to take this time to actually play a game with you.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I'm springing a game on you. It's Two Truths and a Lie.
Yep.
So
you're not going to ask me to do anything weird, are you?
No,
Like that time I played this when I was 11?
Yeah, if this was video, it might have been a different story, but some of the weird things might not translate through a podcast. So you're in the clear.
Perfect.
So I was going to give you your choice of categories, but you had mentioned sprockets, so I'm going to do the sprockets one. I actually might spring the other one on you in a bit, so the listeners and you are going to get a bonus Two Truths and a Lie. So this is going to be sprockets themed.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to name 3 facts, quote unquote, about sprockets, one of which is a lie, so you spot the lie. Okay. The theme song to Sprockets is Electric Cafe by Kraftwerk. The monkey in Sprockets is a pygmy marmoset named Jürgen. And Ben Stiller appeared in the first Sprockets sketch. Which one of those is a lie? He's thinking.
I'm pretty sure that the Kraftwerk theme is a part of Sprockets.
Sprockets. Best German Television presents Sprockets. Meet your host, Dieter.
I also think, wasn't Ben Stiller like a pseudo cast member around this time? I feel like they may have had them. And I also feel like I was watching Sprockets earlier today, and I don't think the monkey is named Jurgen. I don't know the actual phylum, genus, species, as you named it there, but that's what I'm gonna go for. Is the lie is the second one.
Okay, so the theme song to Sprockets is a slowed down version of Electric Cafe by Kraftwerk. Ben Stiller was a cast member around that time, and he did appear on Sprockets as Eddie Munster. So the monkey in Sprockets, I have no idea if it was a pygmy marmoset. I actually Googled monkey types. So it's not, the monkey in Sprockets was actually named Klaus.
Klaus, that's right.
Who may or may not have been a pygmy marmoset. So you got that right. And
nice one.
Your Sprockets bona fides are intact. So,
love that.
So great job. So I'm going to let you run with this. I'll say up top that I, as a weird little kid, used to wear a tight black turtleneck and do Dieter impressions. So that's where I stand on Sprockets. Exactly. Why not? So what do you have to say about Sprockets?
I was thinking about this today as I was like rewatching some of these, is that I find these so much funnier now than I did, in the time when I was watching the reruns in that age group. I was just, maybe it was just in the hopes of being more of a normie that I was like, this is just a little bit too weird for me to let myself fall into, other than, it's not, people are still quoting these lines in middle school anyway, walking around with like a little girl and, and it's, so I think, but just listening to it today, man, just, he's such a good writer, like the way he plays with language. And as I mentioned, this sort of conversation about socialism in Wayne's World and the play on words that he puts in these guests' mouth to say in the very specific accent too. It's not like he's just doing it to be silly. That thing is dialed. His dialects are so right on. I just found myself appreciating that more than I ever have today.
Yeah, you're so right. And I'm the same way. As I got older, I started appreciating more of the nihilistic qualities that were in this sketch. I mean, they were always fun. So for a little kid, the Sprockets sketch could be a lot of fun. There's people dancing. There's a little monkey. There's the host saying, "Touch my monkey," and all of that stuff.
Yep.
But as an adult, you start picking up on more of the dark comedy and dark humor, and that's what a lot of that was something that Mike Myers was so good at, and it just bled through so much in Sprockets. Do you have any Sprockets in particular that you like to go back to?
I feel like I like the one with Woody Harrelson for some reason. That one really tickles me.
What is your take on Euro Disney? I was so disgusted by Euro Disney that I threatened to gnaw at my own genitals like a small woodland creature in protest.
Delicious.
My disgust was such that I decided to develop a counterculture theme park as an alternative to Euro Disney, so I designed Euro Trash.
Euro Trash. Curious, please tell us more.
Euro Trash is a celebration of the repellent and painful in everyday European life. For example, Euro Disney has Fantasyland. Euro Trash has Ennui Village.
Speaking of which, would you like to touch my monkey?
Touch him, love him, leave him an Swinky.
It is safe, Klaus.
Please touch Klaus.
Klaus.
Oh.
It took a while, but he is smitten with you, I can tell.
The Woody Harrelson one is a super classic one. Kyle MacLachlan was in one that was really memorable to me. It was a take on America's Funniest Home Videos. It was Germany's most disturbing home videos.
Yep.
Something like that. And that Kyle MacLachlan, that whole episode was great, but that Kyle MacLachlan on Sprockets sketch really definitely stands out to me. So I don't know if anybody else out there was a weird little kid and wore the black turtleneck and danced around, but if you were that little kid, you're not alone. So
I did wear the black turtleneck and dance around, but that had more to do with me just being in, middle school concert band than it had to do with Sprockets. So
fair. What other character or sketch do you think we have to talk about here?
This one has not aged well. I'll just come right out the top here. But
it's all right.
I, for many years, had said my favorite SNL sketch of all time was Japanese Game Show. This is the one where it just the writing of this is like peak SNL, right? For those that haven't seen it, it's a Japanese game show. Mike Myers is the host, speaks Japanese. Alec Baldwin is one of the contestants. Janine Garofalo is the other contestant, and Chris Farley is the third contestant. And as it goes on, they go right down the line. They get to Chris Farley, and he says, "I don't speak Japanese." And of course, the crowd explodes, and he's like, yeah, whatever, this is fun. Turns out it's one of these Japanese game shows where they have to mutilate themselves when they get a wrong answer. So he panics, but starts doing really well on the game show by accident, and it continues to escalate, and Chris Farley gets excited and barely gets the last question wrong before getting jumper cables hooked up to his testicles and electrocuted in front of the crowd. It's perfect every way. It is a 1976 seasoned wine. It is the Jordan Bulls. It is the whatever we'd like to call it. It's perfect in every way, except for the fact that there's three white characters speaking gibberish Japanese. And great,
Right, and I don't want to excuse something like that. I mean, obviously in 2022 that wouldn't fly, nor should it. But we both were around in 1990. I think this was either 1994 or 1995. It was in season 20, and that's just we weren't as enlightened as just a culture in general. So we should just say that up front. But I am in complete agreement with you. I think this was a gem of a pretty messy season in season 20, and this sketch in particular, I think, was a gem that stood out. And to me, a lot of it was the timing. So if you get past the obvious Mike Myers playing a Japanese game show host, there were a lot of the jokes and a lot of the brilliance of the sketch had to do with the timing and with the obliviousness of Chris Farley and quite frankly, a lot of the sadistic qualities of Mike Myers and that character in particular. So I completely agree. I watched this sketch a few days ago, and I honestly still enjoyed it. Qualifiers, understood.
It's certainly the general conceit of like a Midwestern American accidentally ending up on a foreign language game show and accidentally doing really well is hysterical. It's, probably better adapted for our time as like maybe he goes to Sweden or something and he gets Midsommar torture applied to him instead of, a lot of the issues we would have with white people putting on a Japanese accent. But man, up until I had that realization of its poorly aged quality, this has always been one of my favorites. Another one that's on that best of that I go back to a lot is theater stories. Obviously as the son of two Liverpool-born parents and he spent a lot of time in England, Mike Myers has some of the most definitive North American actor doing English accent credibility maybe of anyone ever, and just deeply understands the things that we find funny about them.
Right.
The seriousness with which he takes this interview with a number of characters doing equally wacky things makes this even funnier. It looks like maybe the closest precursor we have to Austin Powers as he's in his in his plaid sort of professor jacket, conducting these ridiculous interviews. So theater stories always jumps out to me, as well as just kind of an indication of, what was to come from him for a lot of the rest of his career.
Yeah, I was thinking about that Austin Powers connection, and that's one of at least a couple of examples of him almost workshopping a future movie character on the show. One of the first characters that he did on the show was Stuart Rankin.
Oh, come on, you know who Prime Minister Dundas is. Well, isn't that typical, huh? The typical American attitude. Oh, we're America, we're the center of the universe. We don't have to know who Prime Minister Dundas is. Look at the Super Bowl. The 49ers call themselves the world champions. Well, they no played Scotland. Well, until they actually play the Aberdeen Razorbacks, we won't know for sure. And the way that Scottish people are portrayed on American television, cheap little bastards with wee beards and kilts, flinging away to beat the bands, playing the bagpipes. Oh, don't take my money, Hootsman, Akai, or Jackie Stewart. Oh, the track is very slick today. You can look for a lot of accidents. And back to you, Chris Economaki in the pits.
But that was, to me, almost a precursor to the dad in So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Oh, my God.
When I saw Stuart Rankin, I was like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme pointing at the TV, like, there he is. There's the dad from So I Married an Axe Murderer, which is one of my favorite comedies ever.
Amazing.
Ever.
My brother, that's one that's deep in when my brother and I, if someone goes in front of the TV, he's like, look at this, move your giant head. It's like a melon on a toothpick. It's like Sputnik. That just seeps into you so deliciously.
Yeah, my cousin Nico and I, they were an SNL fan as well growing up, and so we would look at each other sometimes and out of the blue go, woman. Yeah. Whoa, man. Whoa, man. Just like totally quote that movie as kids. So Mike Myers, if you're an SNL fan around that time, there's fun little Easter eggs, I think, in some of his movies that you can pinpoint back to his time at SNL.
Well,
for sure.
And you start to kind of think about it too. He can perfectly mimic. A lot of his best impressions are Englishmen of various kinds. Obviously, the Beatles being a Liverpudlian himself, and he can do everybody in the Rolling Stones, and that to me is you're a basketball fan, right, Thomas? Right? You think about like the Five Tool players or the whatever the case is of. He's an outstanding game show host, as we've said multiple times. I think about Geek, Dweeb, or Spaz is another great one. I think he did that when he came back to host. As just like a show host, right? Wayne's World, Sprockets, Theater Stories, those are all him, facilitating the sketch. He's an impressionist. He can sing and dance, so I don't know what else sort of it's original characters. He can be a facilitator. I don't know what other stats you think about as to round out sort of the what does Kevin Durant not do well, really?
Right. And I was actually thinking about stats in relation to Mike Myers, and I think that he had a high batting average. We'll go to baseball. We're going to mix our sports references, and I think Mike had...
Emily would be asleep.
She would just be lost.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Noted for future episodes.
We love her, Emily. You get better.
So I think Mike Myers had a really high batting average as a cast member as far as memorable sketches and characters related to what he was in, because he occasionally played supporting roles, but he really stood out as the star of sketches, and when he was the star of sketches, he hit on most of them. So I think it seemed like, relative to what he was in and what he started and what became a hit, Mike Myers had a super high batting average or field goal percentage, if you want to go back to basketball.
Yeah, he could also be kind of a glue guy. I don't know if whenever the fandom levies that, I think we mean it as a compliment. I don't know if the cast members consider that a backhanded compliment or not. People always talk about like Phil Hartman is like one of the great glue guys, right? He just like keeps everything together. Could be the everyman or be the father or do the other things. But, I think that he had that piece too. Obviously, he had these major featured characters that would tear the place to the ground. But it's just, if you watch those seasons straight through, he also just will kind of walk through and he'll serve someone at the restaurant if he has to. He'll go deliver a pizza. He'll go whatever the scene calls for. So he's got sort of a lot of the things that we love about Beck Bennett or Mikey Day, types. Cecily Strong in some cases, I think, to use the modern examples, had all those pieces too.
Yeah, exactly. He'll play a TV executive in the Nude talk show, which was one that I'm doing research for a lot of different episodes. So I watched the Nude talk show recently. It was an early '90s sketch starring Alec Baldwin and John Lovitz and Nora Dunn. And Mike Myers was a TV executive playing total straight man in the sketch, but he served it really well. So that's even something that I often forget about Mike Myers because his characters were so huge.
Totally. I mean, it's certainly not what you think of, and I don't think any of those characters, performers we just mentioned, sort of say like, "Oh, don't you think that I'm as the judge in the Chippendales sketch, I really carry that?" But I think they do take pride in being able to serve each other, right? I mean, you have to be a team player on that show, or else you're gone quickly.
And you had mentioned that he had spent a lot of time. He took inspiration from, like, some part of his family was from England, from the UK, so he took a lot of inspiration from that. He also took inspiration from a member of his family for one of his huge sketches, and I'm going to use that as a segue to throw another 2 truths and a lie at you.
Here we come.
Okay, here we go. All right, so the topic is coffee talk.
Oh, wow. Yep.
All right, can you do your best coffee talk in your Linda Richman accent for me?
Oh, Barbara.
That was great. That's better than what
Talk amongst yourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
Rhode Island, neither a road nor an island. Talk amongst yourselves.
Are you clairvoyant? Because for 2 truths and a lie, there were topics that Linda Richman threw out when she asked the audience to talk amongst themselves because she was too verklempt.
Yeah.
So I'm going to name 3 of the topics that she threw out, one of which is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Rhode Island is neither a road nor an island. Discuss.
Yep.
Dr. Pepper is neither a doctor nor a pepper. Discuss. Mm-hmm. The Red Hot Chili Peppers are neither red nor hot nor chili peppers. Discuss.
Yeah, I know the first one. Man, I'm going to... I really don't know about the other 2. I'm going to say the third one's a lie. I feel like the Chili Peppers... Although, I don't know, Blood Sugar Sex Magic comes out in 92.
Yeah, around then. Yeah.
Major moment. That could have been
They intersected with these sketches.
That could have been relevant. The fans would have known what that was. No, I'm sticking with it. Can't talk myself out of it.
Good man. You got this right. You're really good at this game. So Dr. Pepper's neither a doctor nor a pepper was a topic that Linda Richmond threw out when she became verklempt. The Red Hot Chili Peppers are neither red nor hot nor chili peppers was not a topic that Linda Richmond threw out, and I didn't stump you. So Linda Richmond, he took inspiration from his mother-in-law.
Wow.
For
I didn't realize that
for this sketch. Yeah. His wife, I believe, is from New York, and his mother-in-law is obviously, maybe the Linda Richmond's exaggerated, but he definitely is playing his mother-in-law in these sketches.
Now I'm getting a little verklempt. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. The radical reconstruction of the South after the Civil War was neither radical nor a reconstruction. Discuss. There, I feel better.
These were a lot of fun for me, honestly, to watch.
Yeah, I was watching the one with him and Madonna and Roseanne the other night. It's like, I've never really been a Roseanne guy. I know that's a very easy thing to say nowadays, considering she has defamed herself in every possible way. But in this one, it's like they've kind of thrown her a fastball, and she still finds ways to stumble over it. But Madonna is excellent in that one, and that's the one where Barbra Streisand surprises them at the end, and they all just lose their minds. So, yeah, one of my favorites for sure. That was one. They take a call where they Madonna, says exactly about the things about Madonna that character would, that she's basically like a hussy, So yeah, it's perfect. I mean, kind of a precursor to Bronx Beat too.
So you and I are men of a certain age. We're relatively in the same ballpark. I'm 40. You're 35.
I'm almost on Lipitor.
Almost on Lipitor. So there's a character that Mike Myers played who I find myself relating to
more and more,
more and more by the day, and it's middle-aged man.
Middle-aged man. He has powers and knowledge that are far beyond younger men. Middle-aged man. Caught between 40 and 55. Accruing more interest, yet losing his sex drive. Developing skills and a gut. Middle-aged man.
Oh my God.
Yes. So what did you think of middle-aged man maybe then versus now?
I think it was funny to me then because it's like, this is my dad and my dad's friends. And it's funny to me now because it's just so true. I can't tell you how many times I've said to people, you're looking at my gut, aren't you? I'm working on it, because I literally am working on it, and I have a gut now. It's just here we go. I mean, it's just perfect. He's got a couple great ones. I think Chris Farley's in a couple of these.
His drinking buddy.
Yeah, his drinking buddy. Exactly.
Yeah. Middle-aged man and his sidekick, drinking buddy. Yes. I find myself giving people unsolicited advice about home repairs and things like that to like middle-aged man did. So, and it was funny at the time too. I was a kid and I thought that was hilarious. It was a good sight gag.
Yeah.
First of all, Mike Myers was all about sight gags in general. I mean, he's sunk into a character, and just the writing and the performance. I think middle-aged man kind of gets slept on. I think it's under the radar compared to a lot of Mike Myers characters on SNL.
What seems to be the problem? Oh, hold on. I think I just had a Malox moment.
I think my husband is having an affair.
Tell me, did he recently buy a red sports car?
Why, yes, he did.
Yes. Did he go out and get a haircut that's far too young for his face?
Why, yes, that's amazing.
And finally, does he seem unusually happy lately?
No, not really.
Then he's not having an affair. Just a little middle-aged humor. Right, Trickin' Buddy?
Absolutely.
Hey, what are you looking at? You're looking at my gut, aren't you?
No.
Well, I'm working on it.
I mean, the prosthetic gut alone, I think, is enough for that one. I mean, I have a friend of mine that just bought her first house, and I was like making some dad jokes about like, oh, if you ever need to borrow, my 100-foot orange extension cord, here comes dad. And she was like, oh, we're going to Lowe's to like get some ant traps. And and all of a sudden my brain stopped joking and be like, what you need to do is you need to get Entice. That's the best I mean, if you want to get your ants, you got to get Entice. I got the Amazon link, I can bring them over later. Do you want me to bring them over? Are you doing something later? I'm checking in with her. So
are you looking at my gut? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm working on it. So, it just, continues to be more true the older we get.
I loved Middle-Aged Man. And of course, I'm a huge Chicago Bears fan. So super fans was really important to me as a kid. That might be why I'm a Chicago Bears fan. Now that I think about it, was because of the SNL super fans. I was around that impressionable age. And I need to blame Mike Myers as being part of the reason why I'm a tortured Chicago Bears fan.
Yeah. We had, at one point when I was a kid, got the Chris Farley best of, is the way I think a lot of people did. We were just, at one point, my father said, we're going to rent something else from the video store because we were wearing it out. And that was one of the ones that my friends and I were doing all the time with him pounding his chest because that would, how many heart attacks is that for you? Yeah, it'll be a baker's dozen. So it's just, but again, it's like, Mike Myers and, I think about Dana Carvey or, Kate McKinnon to some extent, of just being able to like these regional dialects. It's like, I don't know if he knows how to do the Philly one. There's only a handful of people that know how to do Philly, but if I had a draft pick and Tina Fey was off the board, I just feel like he could very easily find his way into any of these characters.
Yeah, I would trust him with that too. There's a noticeable New Mexican accent too. I'm from New Mexico, and there is New Mexican dialect, and I bet if Mike Myers spent a day in the right part of New Mexico, that he would get that dialect down. I would definitely trust him with that.
See, I'm from Boston, and everybody does one, and I feel like the good ones are funny and the bad ones are just as funny. So
yes,
there's such a wide range there.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any other characters or sketches that we need to hit on before we head on out of here?
Yeah, the last one I think about all the time is Philip the Hyper Hypo. Maybe another one that hasn't aged as well. This would be a great one if we had Emily here, who also loves just the weird things that little kids do. But as a father of a little kid, just like the way they were able to capture the nonsense that children will say confidently and make it into something that can still move a sketch forward. I mean, it's the other thing. It's like, I'll give you 100 ridiculous thing that my son has said, but it would stall in a sketch. It would just continue to be, this is not going anywhere because this child is spouting nonsense, but they're just find ways to be like, all of a sudden they're in the middle of the conversation and he tells Nicole Kidman, I love you, for no reason. And then they move on. And then she starts talking like a robot. And then it just, there's something about too, as we're talking about his cadence, and maybe this is the Canadian in him, but it's just sort of like, he has things in there. He just says things a little differently than anyone else would if they was on the page of like, how come you don't have to wear a helmet?
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that Canadian come out in him, and he draws out his words like a little kid would.
One time, my mom's car ran out of gas, so she gave me a Snickers bar and a can of Coke. I towed the car home. 7 miles. When we got home, I was tired.
We just moved here from Australia. It's nice here in America.
See that? This is where milk comes for the baby.
Oh.
This is where milk comes for the baby. Right there and there.
Yeah, that Nicole Kidman one especially is one that I've always gone to since around that time. And Philip the Hyper Hypo, he's hyper hypo because he's hyperactive and hypoglycemic. So he makes sure to tell her this, and then he overshares about his parents, and he tells Nicole Kidman that, wow, it seems like you really get a lot of positive support or whatever.
It sounds like you're surrounded by a lot of positive support.
Yeah.
My mom thinks the harness is cruel. My mom thinks it's very necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, Philip the Hyper Hypo is definitely one that I noted too when I was doing this research. So if you, the listener, have any other Mike Myers favorites or sketches that we didn't get to, please let us know. You can follow us on Twitter at SNL Hall of Fame and just kind of let us know what we missed, because I'm sure we did.
Not possible.
So, not,
Every bit of it. Yeah.
So
feedback's not welcome.
No, not only positive feedback.
I'm sorry. I get out of my own little positive bubble and I start yelling.
In Greg's and Emily's honor, please give us positive feedback, because we're all about the vibes here. So after SNL, of course, I mean, we talked about Austin Powers, Shrek. I mean, those two alone sort of gave Mike enough money and cushion in his career to be able to do whatever he kind of wanted after SNL. I want to talk about a couple of things. The Pentaveret, which is a kind of a take on, it comes directly from So I Married an Axe Murderer. Mm-hmm. So it's a Netflix show, and it's just Mike sinking himself into these characters and prosthetics where he seems most comfortable. And then the Gong Show, he did, again, prosthetics, and it was very weird as well. But
what
I mean,
bizarre turn that was.
Yeah, but it's Mike just kind of doing what he loves, which is just sinking himself into characters and being the star of the show, but not as Mike Myers necessarily. So I think all in all, I liked his post-SNL career. I don't know about you, but I did.
Yeah, I think Austin Powers, was much more that was coming out and when I was the exact right age for it. I have a distinct memory of being like, one of the things that we finally were able to, the new movies that were coming out that my father loved, that I loved, was finally meeting in that one with like the Dumb and Dumber era and Austin Powers in particular. I remember specifically showing up to both The Spy Who Shagged Me and Goldmember, and them both being sold out, because this is back in the days where you couldn't reserve your seats, and we just they were just huge. I mean, it's hard to describe how huge they are in a world where the box office is slowly dying around us. But I mean, these are all these movies. I mean, you talk about Wayne's World. It was Shrek. That was another one we saw with the whole family. That was sort of like another one of those just like really nice sort of meeting points that. And as I said, So I Married an Axe Murderer was one that I share with my brother too. So very central to our family, the way a lot of these all-time cast members tend to find ways to just work their way into your heart and mind. And very grateful for Mike Myers' contribution to the zeitgeist.
Yeah, 2 super successful franchises for Mike Myers. So good for you.
He's got a money machine. He's got one of those things that, like, we always think like Paul McCartney's got one of these too, where he's just like, you know what? Why don't we go ahead and remaster Rubber Soul again? All right, everyone, get your baskets out. We're going to turn the machine on for 2 years, while we get the run out of this. I think they do that with like, all right, we're going to do another Shrek video game, or we're going to do Happily Ever After. Everyone get your baskets out. We're going to turn the machine on. So he's got one of those,
and it's well earned, definitely for Mike Myers. So we're gonna put a little bow on this, and I want you to give me your final case for Mike Myers as an SNL Hall of Famer.
It's what we said before, that he's a perfect cast member. To me, it's sort of like when we're evaluating baseball players for the Baseball Hall of Fame, one of the things they have to satisfy is, did they dominate their era? And he was on a cast with Dana Carvey, who, by demographic is someone that they could have been very competitive for screen time and for overall quality. And he went toe to toe with someone who I consider to maybe be the perfect cast member. He's a 100 out of 100. Is Jordan better than LeBron? We can debate it on sports radio all we want, but both of them have achieved the maximum amount they possibly could over the course of their career. So that's sort of where I stand on him, is that there's no weakness in his game. He can serve the sketch, or he can create a phenomenon. He can do impressions, but he can also do bizarre regional dialects. He can do things that are very much in line with sort of the right after the monologue type stuff, like big game shows. Also, he can do 10 to 1s and in sprockets and other things, until like someone like Will Ferrell, where anytime he's on screen, the place is going to explode. So nothing is 10 to 1 with him because the crowd loves him so much. There's no weaknesses in his game. So I don't think there's any doubt on this one.
Okay, that was Greg Croak and Thomas Senna in discussion talking about Mike Myers. And I gotta say, if I wasn't certain before, there was a certain comment that Greg made toward the end that really sort of sealed the deal for me, and it was the idea of dominating your era. This is a guy that was dropped in as a rookie with a tour de force in Dana Carvey, and they went toe to toe. They went toe to toe. He was a star. He was an absolute star on that show and did everything that the show asked of him and then some. I think that for me, I have to reserve a vote for him this season and put him in as a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's me. How you choose to deal with it is up to you. But you can only do that if you register to vote. Go to snlhof.com, click on the voting tab, and you can set yourself up right there to vote. Now, let's listen in on a great sketch that cements the deal and seals the case for Mike Myers. This is Theater Stories from SNL.
The British American Theatre Alliance presents Theatre Stories with your host, Kenneth Rhys Evans.
Hello, I'm Kenneth Rhys Evans, and welcome to another episode of Theatre Stories. Our guests tonight are Sir William St. John Stevens Smythe Kersey, or Nobby, as he's known at the Old Vic.
Hello, always a pleasure.
And our next guest is an actress whose 1931 debut at the Royal Shakespeare was described as both Dionysian and unabashedly insane. I'm speaking, of course, of Dame Sarah Kensington.
I heard my name. They're calling me again.
Yes. And finally, Hollywood film actor and American child star Mickey Rooney.
I was the #1 star in the world. You hear me? Bang, the world.
Yes, of course. Yes. Yes. Now, just before the show started, Nobby here was telling us a story about Sir Laurence Olivier.
Oh, yes. Larry was performing in the American motion picture film Marathon Man, and Dustin Hoffman came to the set one morning looking absolutely wretched. And Olivier said, "You look absolutely wretched." And Dustin said, "Well, I've stayed awake for 24 hours because at this point in the picture, my character has been up all night." And Sir Lawrence quipped, "Oh, Dusty, why don't you try acting?"
Very good, yes.
Well, Dustin shoots back, "Act on this, you old English."
Shame!
And then Sir Larry retorts, "I want a meal, not a snack."
Very clever.
And the American replies, "Self-serve, buddy." And then Olivier takes a beat, as only Larry can, and he says something so perfect, so absolutely perfect.
Incidentally, for your edification, I tried to sell a script to Mr. Dustin Hoffman, and he never called me back. And I've been in the business 68 years. You hear me? I was the #1 star in the world. Bang! The world. I made $200,000 in 1937, and by 1945 I was broke. And I went to my accountant, and I said, "I'm broke." And he said, "Mickey, you can't be broke. You were the #1 star in the world. You hear me? Bang! In the world."
Yes, I quite agree. I've been married 5 times to the same wonderful man.
Yes. That reminds me of a story that is in no way related. I was working with Sir John Gielgud in a production of Troilus and Cressida when I discovered I had no control over the volume of my voice.
Really? You know, I've always felt that John Gielgud had a certain, as the French say, I don't know what.
I was playing Lady Macbeth to John Gielgud's Othello in a production of The Tempest. And who should I see in the front row taking notes but Mr. Potato Head? And the thing that struck me about Mr. Potato Head was that his facial features were completely interchangeable.
Yes, of course. No word of a lie. Mr. Potato Head. Tell me, Mr. Rooney, who was your favorite leading lady?
Look, I'm 4'8". I was never going to romance Miss Kim Novak, but I had the pleasure of performing with the lovely Miss Judy Garland. So I'm not bitter. You see, that's how it works. I'm not a freak. I was the #1 star in the world. You hear me? Bang! The world. In 1965, I called Warner Brothers and I said, "This is Mickey Rooney. I need a job." And the bastard hung up on me.
What a fascinating story, you ghastly American. Bang.
I'm just glad I like women.
What are you getting at?
Yes. Why don't you go away somewhere and have an American hot, a dog?
You
know, I remember a performance of Richard III during the war, and right in the middle of the second act, we took a direct hit from the Nazi buzz bomb. I looked up and saw the proscenium crashing down on me, and I went, ah! And I soiled myself.
Well, I don't blame you. I would have done the same had I seen that.
I don't mean then, I mean just now when I went, ah!
Yes, of course. That was fascinating, but the rest of the story will have to wait because that's all the time we have! So we'll see you next week at Theatre Stories!
That was great. That was Theater Stories featuring Mike Myers, the nominee this week in the cast member category. A solid pick. I want to thank Greg Croak. I want to thank Thomas Senna. I want to thank Matthew Ardill. This has been another great week. Tomorrow, it all gets real, though. Voting opens. Hope you're ready. Now, that's what I've got for you. So do me a favor. On your way past the Weekend Update exhibit, turn out the lights because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNLHOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.